the 3D graphic of meditation basically shows all the different changes that we think occurs during a meditation practice, and it starts out with increased activity in the frontal lobes. When the person is focusing their attention on their sacred object, if you will, they are focusing their attention, and that causes an increase of activity in the frontal lobes of the brain, which help us to do that. As that process goes on, it begins to recruit activity in other parts of the brain, such as the thalamus, which is a very key relay and a very key sensory relay in the brain. It also, if the person is doing a visual meditation, then it will activate the visual areas of the brain. If they're doing a verbal type of practice, like a mantra, it'll activate the language areas of the brain. And when it does this, what we think is happening in a part of the brain called the parietal lobe, which is located towards the back top part of the brain, we think that there's an initial increase of the activity in that area because they're orienting themselves towards this meditative object. As the practice continues, though, they begin to have changes not only in the frontal lobe, but also in the limbic areas, because these are very emotional experiences. And with all of this happening, it also begins to block sensory information as it gets into some of these other areas, like the orienting area of the brain in the parietal lobe. If it does this to a large extent, then the person continues to have an orientation of the self, but no longer has the information upon which to do that. And we think that that's associated with a loss of the sense of self. And in fact, going back to psychedelic drugs, some of the effects that people have seen in blood flow and metabolism in the brain seem to be some of these sensory areas in the frontal lobes that seem to be particularly affected by these drugs and the experiences that are associated with them. Now, in addition to all of this going on, we also expect there to be changes in the autonomic nervous system. So going down to the body itself, we see changes that stimulate both a sense of arousal in some circumstances and a sense of calmness and quiescence in another set. And sometimes you even have a mutual turning on of both of them. People talk about sort of an ecstatic bliss, and obviously it can be a very powerful experience. And of course, the brain has two sides, so as you do these practices, it ultimately affects both sides. And again, my overall model for all of this is that it's a very complicated process. There's not just one part of the brain that's associated with these experiences, but it involves many different parts. And depending on how those parts are activated, whether it's sort of top down through a practice like meditation, whether it's bottom up through some kind of ritual practice, whether there's a drug effect, whether there's some other type of ritual effect, all of them can induce slightly different kinds of experiences and slightly different states for that person, and change how they view the world and how they experience the world. So that's that three-dimensional view of the brain. And then when you look at the brain scans, what we do find are areas of increased activity, increased blood flow in the frontal lobes, right behind the forehead. When people are focusing on their meditation practice, we see decreases of activity in the parietal lobe, which again we think is associated with a kind of a loss of the sense of self and a diminishment of the sense of space and time associated with that. We see increases of activity in the thalamus, which, because we think it is a very active process and can have a lot of sensory kind of phenomena that are associated with it. So there are a lot of changes, and we see this in meditation, in our Tibetan Buddhist meditators, in our Franciscan nuns who are doing prayer. We saw, and even when people are speaking in tongues, a very unusual state, and in many ways kind of this unusual state because they feel like they're being taken over by God's presence, and the Spirit of God is making these unusual vocalizations out of their mouth. What we see is that the areas of the brain in the frontal lobe that normally help them with language and controlling the things that they do with their willful control, these actually shut down in that case. So it's kind of the opposite effect of what you see during a heavily intensive meditation practice. They actually lower the activity in the frontal lobes when they're speaking in tongues. And of course, again, the big question then is so if the parts of the brain that are associated with language are shut down, then what's doing it? And to them, it's the Spirit of God, and an atheist might say, well, it's just part of the brain taking, another part of the brain taking over.